Welcome, Scott. We're here with Scott Brusso, who is a wonderful friend and Dharma teacher and a very interesting individual. And we're going to ask him some questions about his experience with the Dharma and his life with the Dharma. So Scott, where do you want to begin?
Well, I think probably it's good to begin to go back to, my early memories. Of course, as you get older, you forget a lot, and it's been many years, but also, the stuff more recently you forget even faster. So the long-term memories are still somewhat there, but um, it started, pretty much when I was only, I would say probably about 4 years old, something like that, 4 or 5 years old. And I remember having many, many thoughts in my mind, which, I didn't understand and probably didn't know how to articulate really well. One of them was, of course, I had the concept of reincarnation. Um, and it was strange because I was driving with a family and we went by a cemetery and something came up about reincarnation. And when the word reincarnation, was more or less explained, I had like a happiness go over because this was part of my being, but I didn't know how to articulate it. I also used to think of, what's going on? Are there worlds inside my fingernail? Are there universes in there? And am I inside somebody's? So I used to have these thoughts at a, very, very young age that were probably, different than, or at least I felt they were different than, what a lot of people did. Um, I was born with a birthmark in the middle of my head, one of those round birthmarks. And my parents had that removed surgically. So actually some of the surgery thing is actually, there's still remnants of it. It almost pulls up on one side a little bit. But my grandmother had told me if I would have been born in India, I would have been like a king. So I always thought about that, but I didn't think so much about a king, but just somehow it had some type of spiritual ramifications to me, which was interesting because I was down in Bodhnov one day talking to an incarnate Lama. It was actually a Sakyapa Lama from the Sakya tradition that I'd become friends with, and we were talking, and I mentioned to him about the birthmark and things, and he said, yes, that's a sign of some accomplishments from previous lives, which, again, I don't know, I can't remember, the previous life, so I can't say for sure. I mean, you can remember, it's possible to go back and remember, but I can't remember. But it always had very much of a strong feeling for me, so that my life had always had some kind of spiritual type of energy involved in it. It wasn't just normal things you do as kids and running around and that. That was always there, and you know. Basically, I had one experience that took place when I was, very young, which I probably won't talk about so much here now, but it was one which I felt something very powerful, and so powerful that I can't bring it back up exactly like it happened at the time, which of course that's difficult anyway because that's past. But it was I was only at that time probably about 6, 7 years old. But it was just something again which moved along in kind of a spiritual type of energy that I always had felt there. So these were little things that, more or less, when I look back later, I can understand. Then, there's something more to it, you know, than it
Certainly.
was then, and can relate to that with that. So along that type of thing that took place was really a lot of other instances that happened as I became older. as I got older, I had a lot of different things. We were talking a little bit before this, a little bit about sleep and energy and things that happen, and feeling different energy things taking place within me, before falling asleep. Many times I had some similar things to what we were talking about before. And of course, I even, did question that to Lama Yeshe one time as well. And, he basically told me that was, part of my psychic energy and things. So it was quite an interesting thing that took place. But I eventually moved out to California when I was, quite young. And I had a couple very, very interesting situations that took place. So now I had been involved with, because of this, I started getting involved in yoga. Interestingly, in this city of Evanston, where we're sitting right now, I was actually living only a block from here, and the building doesn't exist anymore, but I lived a block from, where we're sitting right now on Kedzie, right around the corner. So, Chicago Avenue, the first street there is Kedzie.
Right, yeah.
And so basically, when I was there, yoga wasn't like it is today. It's not like every block you turn on. There wasn't yoga almost any place. So back then I had a girlfriend, and I said to her, I wanted to do yoga. I was already doing martial arts. So I was kind of involved in the Japanese culture at an early age. And because of that, I was very much felt that, different things like answers to our life, existed within us. That was always something, that I felt very strong about. And, but the funny thing is that I'm doing the martial arts, and I felt my body was too stiff. So we got to talking, and she said, well, I'm going to yoga classes here, and it was held at like the YMCA in Evanston. That's the only place. There wasn't all these, studios. So I went with her and, started doing some yoga there, and, learning to, work with my body a little bit along with the martial arts that I was doing. That, of course, in martial arts, a lot of that, like when you first sit beforehand, it's a little bit of meditation beforehand, and, the Japanese style, Zen, basically. And so, I was pretty much involved, with spending my time with martial arts and even doing tournaments and things. And so when I was on the West Coast, I started in San Francisco. I was getting into tournaments that, all these top names were involved in tournaments back then, the Chuck Norris's and others, which was amazing, because, of course, living in Chicago, we had martial arts here, but it was, not like what was going on out there. So basically, the one thing that happened when I went out there I was with I had two dogs, two German Shepherds, and I had a van. It was basically a '59 Volkswagen van that I bought here in Evanston for $400. And I eventually drove that van had a top on it that opened up so you could sleep up there. It had a refrigerator and sink inside there. So I traveled everywhere with my dogs and in that, down to Florida, to Canada, around, out to the West Coast and back. And so basically, a very, very close friend of mine, almost like a brother of mine, was living in Tacoma, Washington. So basically, I went there and stayed with him for a couple weeks, and he was kind of involved with some iffy people and things. And I was telling him, "You can't deal with these kind of people. This is not good. Let's go." I'm going to San Francisco, and had him come with me. And actually, he had a dog, and we had 3 dogs inside there, and put all our stuff. I had 2 bikes, and all my possessions were in the van. And we got to San Francisco, and we were living, interestingly, in an apartment in Haight-Ashbury. So we found this apartment. We were living there for some time, but eventually we wanted to get out of there. It was, it was just a strange area, and we wanted to find something else, so we were going to move someplace else. But we went out to some clubs the night before, and when we got back, we had all of our stuff already packed inside the van. He said, "Do you want to leave the dogs inside there?" I said, "No, I'm not leaving the dogs inside the van. That's not going to happen." This is very clear in my mind, remembering it. Okay, so next morning, it's already getting to be, 10, 11 o'clock, and, we didn't get to bed till really late, whatever it was, 4 o'clock or something. And I went outside because I heard this bang, 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 bang. There was construction going on. And I'm looking, and the van's not there. It completely disappeared. So I went up to the construction workers. I said, did they tow cars away because of doing this? And they said no. So anyway, long story short, the van was stolen with all my possessions and things. And I felt like unbelievable release from attachment, to all those things. It was like, good, they're gone. They're all gone. Eventually they found my van. It had nothing in it anymore. The van was still, usable, but the bikes, the TV, all the stuff inside there was all gone. But that was the first feeling I got of non-attachment. I knew about attachment and non-attachment, but that was the first thing that was a really, really strong feeling.
So interesting.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing that took place, one of the other interesting things that took place, and while I was there, I was spending all my time in martial arts and training, and so it was almost like being in a retreat, but a martial arts retreat and things. I was doing that. I also would go to the Zen Center, which was, Suzuki Roshi was alive at that time. So he had a city center and also the country, out on the other side of the water.
Was it called Green Gulch back then? Or that's what it's called now, I think, Green Gulch.
Is that what it's called now? Yeah, it was
Tassajara.
Tassajara. Yeah.
Oh, Tassajara is like the third one that I think is further in the mountains.
So it might have been that one, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I'd go there, we'd go there on Sundays out to the country center and things. But it was always a great experience as far as, being there and, training at the Zen Center. I'd spend time in the Japanese town, basically, where they had the, like the Kabuki hot springs inside there, where you could go inside and, get into the hot baths. Anyway, it was very, very nice and interesting. But I ended up having a kind of girlfriend that I met. And believe it or not, but she was actually she managed Santana. So I had been over at her place when, Santana and his brother and others, would be there and things. But up on the shelves in her apartment were all these medical books. And I started looking, one day I just started looking into the medical books and things. And it hit me about how much pain and suffering, was in the world, looking at that. And it made me think about, one of my sisters who was having a lot of problems from early age with asthma. And she had a curvature of the back and things. And so I was thinking, I'd like to be able to heal. I would like to be able to do something to help these people. But it could take me years to be studying these books and do it that way. So that gave me an impetus, where I wanted to go and just go into a kind of a retreat, go off someplace. And at that time, I was looking to go to, I believe they're called the Seychelles Islands off of India. Go to, southern India, and they're off the island, off the India quite a bit. But there's the islands, and just, be there alone on the island, and from there, see if I can find, what is the ability to heal people and find, the answers to life and things there. So that became a very strong, a strong driving force in there. the interesting thing that happened is one night I went out. After this happened, one night I went out. I was with some friends, and we went over. We went down to the ocean, and there was heavy waves coming in and things. And it was a cold night. It wasn't warm. San Francisco's cold all year round, but it was a cold night. And we were sitting there and enjoying the waves, the sound of the waves, a little bit meditating in the space. And a wave came in and got soaking wet. So when we left there, went back to the apartment, I couldn't get in. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't find the key. So I went upstairs, and I went up onto the deck there, and I sat down, and somehow intuitively, I said, this cold, I can either get very sick from this, because it was, going to be a long time before somebody was coming home, or I can concentrate on heat inside of me. I intuitively knew this was, so of course, in the Tibetan Buddhist traditions is the practice of tumo, which, is like a psychic heat, psychic fire. The actual translation of it is more like like powerful woman or something, but it's like the red heat, that exists, within inside of ourselves. So I somehow knew to sit up there and focus my mind onto the heat, since my inside body temperature should be 98 degrees. And I wasn't one of the Tibetan yogis that's out there and dries off all the sheets, but I was able to, find a way to be up there and be in that cold, but not have the cold overtake me. So, of course, years later, when I learned about these teachings and things, it's like, that was already, these things were already inside of my mind, were already inside of my consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, so these were, this is what, spurred me along, along the way, that there's different things going on beyond the ordinary, way of living. So this drive to go and get to some place and to be able to try to help, mankind somehow, having, finding the wisdom and energy to do this, took me to going to say, goodbye to my grandparents and things down in Florida, leaving my dogs with my sister, meeting her, going off and traveling through Europe, and even spending some time in Greece, in the Greek islands, and I spent weeks in a cave there on my way, to where I was going to eventually end up going. And, I ended up going through, I was in Turkey, and, I was in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it was interesting for me when I was on the buses in Afghanistan, just like they are in India, they're not cushioned, they're just wood. And on the buses, there's goats, and they bring animals on and things inside there. And this thing's pounding and boom, 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 boom. And all of a sudden, my mind's thinking to myself, my world was, Chicago, the North Shore of Chicago. This was no concept, nothing within myself. Interestingly, too, also with with Afghanistan is that when I was getting ready to leave Afghanistan, so I was in Kabul and Herat and different cities there traveling, and we had different types of the probably pre-Taliban, they'd come down on horses, to get money from the buses, like extract the toll and things from them and things. So it was a something, it's not part of my life growing up in in the U.S. Just very interesting to me, and I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic experience. When I was leaving Afghanistan and going to go from Afghanistan into Pakistan on the Afghani border, they pulled, for whatever reason, they pulled me into a room. And they were basically, trying to harass me. And the good thing is that I really pretty much knew, the discipline that I grew up with martial arts now for many years, and what I'd been practicing in the yoga and everything else, that I didn't react to what they did many things to try to intimidate me. My mind said to me that I could disappear from this moment. My family would never know what happened to me. Very easily, like that, you know. So I just stayed there and answered whatever questions, didn't react to some of the things they would do with banging tables or doing different things. You know, of course, you know, that was a time of life. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw, did you ever see the movie Midnight Express?
I did a long time ago, I think. Yeah. Where they get arrested, right? Or something.
He got arrested. It was in Turkey. And actually, everybody, so it's not something that I was different. All the Westerners would go to the place where he took them back to, where he said he bought the drugs at the one time in there, which is called the pudding shop, because people used to leave messages on boards for people. So, hey, I was here 2 weeks ago, I'm going to be there, we can meet, or whatever it is. But everybody would go to that. And, you know, I was in that place. And of course, when I saw that movie afterwards,
could have been you.
Yeah, it could have been. But I mean, I wasn't really involved with drugs and things per se. That wasn't my purpose. I had a different purpose, what I was there for. So eventually, of course, I got out, and then as I was going through Pakistan, I decided when I got to India, I heard about this place called Dharamsala. And, you know, when you come in, you know, you go across the border, and then you can take a, you know, a bus and things. And so I went to a Dharamsala, and pouring rain, you know, rain was coming down heavy. I got off the bus, you know, by myself. I get off there, and the first person I see is a Tibetan monk. So they live up above in McLeodganj, where His Holiness the Dalai Lama lived. I never heard of Tibet. I mean, it's strange, but I never heard of Tibet. And so, you know, that was very, very interesting, you know, situation. And so from that, I went and I found a place that I rented out, which I think cost me, I think like $30 a month. You know, a little hut and things that I stayed in. And I heard about that Dalai Lama had they have what's called there the Tibetan Library in Dharamsala. It's actually in between Dharamsala and McLeodganj, so it's up the hill. And there was a Tibetan Lama there who was my first teacher, Geshe Nawang Dargay. And he would teach 3-hour classes, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I took all of them. I'd go every day. One thing I also want to point out, just on a funny thing that happened again. While I was in Turkey, you know, when I was in Istanbul, there was a guy and his girlfriend that I became friends with, and we were, you know, walking to go see some sights, you know, go see some different mosques or whatever there, and we got lost. And we walked into a police station. They didn't speak any English. And immediately, the energy I felt in there was wrong energy. So almost back to that, like, Midnight Express, real, you know. And I said to the people, let's go, you know. And they said, why? I said, they don't speak English, let's go, let's leave here. So we left, you know, because I just felt we were in the wrong place, wrong time, you know. Yeah. So being, you know, kind of being intuitive to what the surroundings were and things. So from that stage, basically, you know, we went, and I, you know, was taking teachings and things every day. And I remember some point into my time there, I had a vivid dream, very lucid dream. And the dream was that I woke up in my bed, you know, back in Chicago. And I said, what did I do? Because when I was in there taking the teachings, it was like coming home. The feeling was just fantastic, outstanding. Listening to those teachings was like nectar to my ears. Whatever I heard on all these teachings were just so powerful. So, you know, so basically, when I woke up from that dream told me not to be at any point looking to go back home, but continue my journey. Now my journey, didn't mean I had to get down to southern India and get off to the Seychelles Islands, because it felt like I came home already. And so, walking up and seeing, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there, and the monks, with the long horns, ooh, and the chanting, and going into the temples, and I'd hear the different pujas going on, the ceremonies taking place. It was like I could have sat there forever. You're up there in the, up there in that space. It was just phenomenal. Something, I couldn't think of anything better. It was the greatest thing. So that was a memory that always, stood with me. That everything I needed, was within these teachings, and being there with the Dalai Lama. I was up there when I, seeing things happen that I'd never seen before, because they had, one of the oracles, because there was a big ceremony going on, and he was doing a ceremony to stop the rain. And so he went through the ceremony, and the clouds opened up, and the sky was there, and they go ahead with the ceremony and things. And these were just very, very, very powerful, types of experiences for me. So eventually, we ended up going down. The library closed in the winter, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama every year does the one tantric initiation, Kali Chakra, which he's done, of course, here now in the U.S. a number of times and other places. But outside of Tibet, he'd do that down in Bodh Gaya. So Bodh Gaya is where the Buddha was enlightened. And so the Bodhi tree is there that he sat under and reached enlightenment. So there's many things built there. So we went down there and basically went there for this initiation. Hundreds of thousands of Tibetans, thousands of monks, of lamas, the highest lamas of every sect, and Tibetans that were nomads that had, were living in the country of Tibet and things, and found their way out, and just amazing, amazing energy, just all camped outside there and doing all those things go on. This was in 1973.
So it's like a different Woodstock.
It was a different type of Woodstock. Yeah, exactly. So it was unbelievable. And then I heard
the good kind that has no hangover.
Right. Yeah, very much the other side of Woodstock from that sense. But Woodstock was based on some good, principles and things. Yeah. So I heard about this Lama was going to be giving a talk in English in the Japanese temple in Bodh Gaya that night. So we went in there, and it turned out to be Lama Yeshe. And he's sitting there, and he gets in, sits down. He's sitting there just quietly, does his meditates for a little while, and then the whole temple is packed with Westerners and things there, from all over the world, that heard, because everything going on in the ceremonies of the Dalai Lama was in Tibetan, and there were some people there translating some of it, but of course it was very deep and esoteric, and it wasn't Lama Yeshe translating it or Lama Zopa translating it. So Lama Yeshe was up there, and it was just like, mystical, totally mystical. So I remember with my, I had one other, close friend, that I'd met in Dharamsala, African American. He was nicknamed Yogi. And so basically I spoke and I said, we decided we wanted to go to, to Kopan, where Lama Yeshe was. And so, we went to Geshe Nawang Dargay and asked permission, because I felt he was my teacher and wanted to do so. I went and said,
How did you feel that? So you said it was mystical, and I'm curious about this because I know he's one of your main teachers. So
he's my main teacher.
He is your main teacher. So what do you feel okay to describe like how did you make that connection with him?
There's not words.
Mm.
There's not words for it. It's basically, I mean, it's just an energy that's overtaken. So if we put it on an ordinary sense, probably, when we go through life, for whatever reason, all of a sudden we meet somebody, and some people we feel completely in tune with right away. Others we don't, and we don't want to necessarily be around them. But some people we feel completely in tune. So this was a type of being tuned in a level that couldn't be explained.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just curious what your experience was like, but yeah.
Yeah, it was like it was like lights going off. It was awakening and things. Mm-hmm. And of course, for myself, Lama Yeshe, as my main teacher, anytime he talked, I had lights go off. I would meditate while he was giving talks, and the talks were just opening up, things inside of me, areas that I didn't know were there.
And he immediately recognized you in some way, and was just like.
Well, I don't know whether
I don't know about recognized, but he took you on as a student, no problem.
Yeah,
he could tell you were ready for it or whatever. He felt the same way.
Oh yeah. No, I remember one time I had some, the time I had another, I guess the word would be epiphany, another thing that, something happened. It was when I was thinking, I wanted to become a monk, I was already dedicating my life. Lama Yeshe was a Lama that did not believe that we just collect teachings like you collect food and put it up in your cabinet and put it in your fridge, and if you don't touch it, it ends up going bad. So Lama Yeshe was from day one was about practice. So even when we received different types of powerful initiations, those initiations, generally they come with some obligation where you'll do the practices and they repeat the mantras and da. Lama Yeshe, would had us do those, but to do retreats on them. So we would do the retreats, and then of course at the end of the retreat there's the fire puja, which you've seen. You do a certain thing which is kind of the completion of it. But when Lama would teach something, it was basically the necessity to experience it. And so that's what he did. Lama Zopa was the same way. Lama Zopa would Lama Zopa would have a subject basically, over what we would be learning, let's say at, like one of the courses or something, but he might only stay on one thing for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's very in-depth. And it's to obtain, so I don't know if the word is right, to obtain it, or, I think about it as a musician, like there's all these things you can learn. Some people, like you can learn how to read music, you can learn music theory. You can get many degrees, PhD in it, right? But nothing matters, only what you've obtained or what's in you. I say in the marrow of your bone. That's how I.
Well, that's that's what it is. I mean, that's what I felt at first with martial arts. I felt that somebody say, "Oh, you do karate." I say, "I'd like to think I am karate." More that this is where you begin to absorb, within yourself. Yeah.
So did you want to take up? You were just about to tell us how you started to this journey of Yeshe and Lama Zopa.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, that's what took place. We got permission. Geshe Nelson Dargay said, "Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead." And so so we went and basically ended up doing first thing ended up doing some courses that they used to have a course that you would do, one in the spring and one in the fall. In the winter, November, December is a 1-month course and things. And so basically we went to that, and then the course ended, and most people at that point, we were getting up to about 200 people would come to these courses. And so most of the people would then go off with, if they lasted, if they made it through, but, you didn't lose too many, but there would be some people would leave, and, the course just wasn't for them. They would leave, and it's fine. But, you have a couple hundred people, and then most everybody would leave. But this was my life. So, I stayed on and did retreats. I did a retreat that went for months and months and things. And so basically, this was more or less my life, except for the fact that I had said, I went to Lama Yeshe one point, and I said to him, I want to dedicate myself, for this. So I think, at this stage, I should become a monk and things. So, first of all, Lama Yeshe was unbelievable. Lama Yeshe would go, the Tibetans, when they're shaking hands is touching foreheads. So, Lama Yeshe went to touch my forehead, but before he ever touched it, I felt, the energy was beyond belief and things with it. So, in any case, I said to him that, and now at this point, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, while we were in retreat, were leaving and going off to, I think the first place they went was to Australia in '74. And they gave some courses there, and eventually that's where they got donated the land, Chenrezig Institute in Queensland, which was about 200 acres of land, up in, Queensland. And so he was there, but he also went into the, went to the U.S., did a tour in the U.S. So now, one of his and Lama Zopa's teachers from before was a Lama up in Madison, Wisconsin, Geshe Sopa. So Geshe Sopa was up there, and he basically was in like the Far Eastern Studies or language. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they weren't using him. He had maybe 2 students that I think he was teaching, Dharma to. And here's this phenomenal Lama, that's living up there. So they were up there, and they were going to be giving a public talk. Lama Yeshe was going to give a public talk. So I wrote back to my parents, to let them know if they could go, that would be good. So my parents went there, and they, met and talked to Lama Yeshe, and, it was great. They had no bad things whatsoever. The Lama's pretty interesting. When he came back and things, we talked, there was, an ordination that was going to take place where you become monks and things. But he said, I need you to go home first and see your family, because if this was still going to be he didn't say this, but I know afterwards, this was because if I went home and the pull was too strong there, and this wasn't meant for me, I wouldn't make it back. Or if there was a conflict with my parents. He didn't. He always wanted you to make sure that your parents were fine, with what you're doing. So everything was good. And when I went back, that's when I brought back those 2 friends from here, Brad, who just recently passed away, and Dennis. And they only came back for a course, for the meditation course. And then they left, and came back to the, back to the U.S. Of course, I stayed and, went into retreat and took my ordination. I was fortunate enough that Lama, he arranged, so there's 2 types of ordinations as a monk. One's a novice monk, which is 36 vows, and the other is a, what's called, the full ordination, which is 253 vows that you take. So, His Holiness the Dalai Lama had 2 main tutors that I could even show you at Lama's house. I think I might have shown you once before. Dalai Lama's there with each of the tutors sitting next to him. So I was ordained a novice monk by His Holiness Trijang Rinpoche, the junior tutor, and I was ordained a full monk later on by His Holiness Ling Rinpoche, who is actually the lineage holder of the entire Gelugpa tradition. Many people think the Dalai Lama is, but it's not the Dalai Lama. It was actually His Holiness Ling Rinpoche. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was both the spiritual and the temporal head of Tibet. So although his, so much of that training was within the Gelugpa tradition, he also had all the different, he had the understandings and teachings from all the traditions. And so, from that standpoint, it was very powerful, to, of course, had the ability to receive teachings and, receive initiations from, from these high lamas. Another one of the unbelievable high lamas that was also a kind of a tutor was His Holiness Serkong Rinpoche, who, we were able to go visit and see and take teachings from all the time. And so, the ability through Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa to, receive teachings, follow, what they were doing the practices and things, allowed us to then also come in contact with unbelievable other high lamas, would come to, Kopan to give talks and to teach and things. And so, allowed, the ability to really see and meet many of these, which are now just, now they've passed away. Many of them passed away like in the 80s and 90s and things, and, now incarnated, and some of them 20, 30 years old or whatever. But I was also lucky that when I wasn't in retreat, I went down to Bodhnath as well, and when I heard there were teachings and things going on, I would take different teachings. So I was fortunate enough to be able to take teachings and receive a number of times, actually, the Black Hat ceremony from His Holiness Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa. Living now is the 17th Karmapa, a beautiful, amazing Lama that's existing today now, but before that, the 16th Karmapa, very powerful. I took teachings from. The head of the Nyingma was Dujung Rinpoche, His Holiness Dujung Rinpoche. I was able to receive teachings from him, also from one of his sons who passed away some years ago, but was, a powerful incarnate Lama. And then the fourth sect, the Sakyapa, Sakya Trizin, which is actually one of Lama Lobsang's main teachers too, I was able to receive initiation teachings from him as well. And so I was able to really I was like a hungry dog,
trying to get what you can.
Trying to listen to what I can and because of Lama Yeshe, trying to incorporate it and things.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so basically, this was, this is the way that it evolved. Now, one of the years, I think it was in 1976. Oh, by the way, when I went back, I was able to drive up every weekend to Madison, or most weekends, and almost spend the entire day with Geshe Sopa. As I said, he still only had 2 students, one who kind of took care of him all the time, but didn't really have other students. But I'd go there and just sit with him, and if I had questions, I'd ask questions, or we would just sit there, and this was very powerful, very powerful time. So he was a very powerful teacher. Now, fast forward to 1976. First thing was, I can't remember if it was that summer or the next, but Lama Yeshe had put me in charge of the meditation course. So there were 200 students there, and I would be there to coordinate. So I would lead them all through meditations. I would go get Lama Zopa for the teachings. When Lama Yeshe was coming to give teachings, I would go to get him and bring him back, and was able to do all of that, and able to answer questions for question and answers and things that would take place. And it was kind of interesting to me because as a youngster back at school, if you had a book report, I was frightened. I never wanted to get in front of the class and give a book report. Now here I am, teaching, trying to help lead meditations and question and answers with these, with the 200 some students and things there. They're taking it.
And you didn't have that same nervousness.
No.
You just jumped into it.
Yeah, jumped. Well, what I found was strange things coming out of my mouth, which I already knew that it was Lama Yeshe speaking through me. He had awakened. The inner Lama Yeshe would come out. So it'd be, it'd just be a different experience. what also took place after that is that we had the Western monks and nuns that also lived up at Copan, back then, and I was put in charge of the monks as the Geikor. Now there were other students there that had been with Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa longer and that, but for whatever reason, he liked my energy and had me kind of be in charge. So I had to make sure they were, to the morning pujas to do things, and just what we would be doing, throughout the day. But the beauty of the whole thing is that Geshe Sopa came to Copan that summer. So Geshe Sopa was agreed to teach all the Westerners the Bodhichara Avatara, which is the beautiful, incredible text by Shantideva, Indian poet yogi, which is laying out the entire path to enlightenment. And so Geshe Sopa had a very beautiful and soft, eloquent way of talking and teaching and things. So basically, I was going to see him every day to talk about the teachings and what we would do and things and go forth. So I was able to coordinate. So this was very fortunate. There was a nun who was in charge of the nuns, Thupten Wangmo. She was interesting because her son was there at Copan as a young boy. He was a monk that stayed and lived there forever as a Westerner. Her grandfather, I believe it was the writer or director of Gunsmoke. So interesting, just weird, which had other connections along the way because some different people came from Hollywood, would come to the meditation courses and things. There was one person that Lama Yeshe liked very much, John Schwartz, who passed away some years ago. He wrote some films and things. One of the films was, what was it called? I can't remember it now, but it was a guy in the army, and he was like into yoga and things, so he didn't want to do things, and so they went to give him basically punishment to stand like this with a bucket, holding a bucket in each hand filled with water. Wow. And just stand there. And they couldn't believe how long he's holding it because he was sitting there, he was meditating. Yeah.
So you're a monk. You're doing all. It sounds like just you're in the realm you want to be in. Kind of not too akin to some of my experiences of going to Spain as a musician and studying and meeting all these groups, but much more a deeper experience because it's spiritual experience. Although that was beautiful in its own right, But and then at some point you came back and you spent many years there, 8-10 years there, I think.
So basically, what had happened is that I was called to see Lama Yeshe, and Lama Yeshe said, "I'd like for you to go to Australia. I want you to go to Chenrezig Institute and be a spiritual director at Chenrezig Institute." So, of course, that's what Lama wanted me to do, so that's fine. So I went to Australia, which was later in '77, and basically went to Chenrezig Institute. Now, at this time, Lama had sent out a teacher, Geshe Lodin, and a translator who is an incarnate Lama who's still teaching today. You can find his teachings on YouTube and things, Zazab Tukul. So Zazab Tukul is a incarnate Lama from, incarnated many, many times. I can't remember, maybe this is his 9th incarnation or so. So he was there as a translator, but of course he was much more than just a translator there. They had used in Dharamsala 2 translators that live up in Wisconsin, in Madison still, who also were Tukus. Were incarnate lamas, and so they would do the translating for Geshe Nawang Dargay. But their English was good enough to try to be able to express some of these very difficult concepts, which are not part of the language so much of our English language. So so I was sent out to there, and so there were some Western monks, not ones that were first in India and things there, though, and some nuns living there at Chenrezig Institute, and so I was in charge of them. And then I also instituted all the different teaching things that would come about what we'd be doing and things. Geshe Loden would be doing the teachings basically, but I would take care of the spiritual program and things. So I introduced Tai Chi up there, and we had medicine, Chinese medicine, learning acupuncture and shiatsu and things from, there was a Chinese master in Melbourne, and one of his students, Inta, if I remember her name properly now, McKinnon, was phenomenal. So she was like a doctor too, a Chinese doctor, and so I invited her up to come and give courses and things there. So we did that and did yoga, and so I expanded on beyond a little bit the Tibetan, but still within the spiritual realm, of some of these different practices and things there.
How long were you there?
I was in Chenrezig for about 2.5 years, and then Lama Yeshe asked me to go to Melbourne. So in Melbourne, there was a center there. It's a city center, which was called Tara House. Now it's called Tara Institute, but it was called Tara House back then. So I was sent there to do the same thing, set up spiritual programs. So I would give teachings and meditations throughout the week, and I would go different places. I would travel. Lama Yeshe was very much into Western psychology and using that for teaching and things. So he was very close to one of Carl Jung's students, Dora Kelp, I think was her name, in Switzerland. And so Lama had her do things, and he'd do things together with her. She had a student in Australia who was actually an American, who used to be a priest, Patrick Jansen. And so myself and Patrick became very close friends. In fact, he had come here and stayed at my house and things here afterwards, but we travel all over the place, all throughout Australia and New Zealand, and give courses in death and dying. He did a lot of work inside hospices and things in Sydney. So he lived in Sydney, and when I'd pass through or go to Sydney to give teachings, I would stay with him. So when I went to Melbourne and things too, I did the same thing with having, developing a lot of programs. I used to go to 2 universities to give talks. There was a group that was from Malaysia that, that formed a kind of Buddhist thing, and I would go with them. And so Lama eventually sent out a Lama and a translator at Tara House as well, but I would do my stuff as far as the Western way of teaching, and would be there and help develop all of it. As far as which way to kind of introduce it to the Western mind, right, at that time. So basically, I was there doing that, and interestingly, I was doing a lot of different retreats. I did things out in the country. There were some different centers out in the country and things that, you're able to do retreats and that. And so I was doing, actually I've stepped ahead a little bit. I was fortunate enough, because of the position I was in, to work on a committee with a few people to bring His Holiness the Dalai Lama the first time coming to Australia, which was in 1983. So, we brought His Holiness out there and, arranged everything, but then also, Lama Yeshe had come to do a course, and there was a country center that one of the, it was like it'd be like a Western center here. It was called Sandhurst Town. And so this student took this land, where people would come to it and be like being in the, old Australian outback or something there, and he offered it to Lama for things, and we ended up doing a course. Lama did a course there. It was called a Mahamudra course, of course, which is very much connected to Kargyu. There's a Galupa Kargyu Mahamudra teaching. Then I went for weeks, and I worked, closely with Lama, and things with that, because I would take him to and from the teachings and things. So the reason I'm telling you this story was it was very, very interesting, because about 1 week before the entire town was to be invited to come up and have a day there, like a day in the village type thing, where people could come and see, there'd be the other students there, the monks there, and what was going on. And so one of the people, 7 or 8 people sitting around the room inside there, said, well, what happens if it rains that day? Lama said, don't worry, I guarantee it doesn't rain. It won't rain. Okay, so we finished going over some other things in that meeting, and I'm back with Lama, going back, and I said, Lama, just one thing. And I never questioned Lama in my life. I never saw him, in my mind, I never saw him do anything that wasn't totally brilliant. I said, Lama, why did you have to say I guarantee? Why didn't you just say it'll be okay, or we'll do something? Why did you say guarantee? He turns like this, and his eyes go as big as Mahakala's eyes, huge eyes. You doubt me? Like that. It's like, whoa. And, you just get frozen in time, basically with this. Okay, so now fast forward 1 week. This was going to be taking place on Saturday. Saturday comes, and just like Friday, it's a mess out there. Heavy clouds, storms, crazy outside there. 100% true story. Okay, so I go over to get Lama to be, getting ready to go over, to where I'm going to take him to give an introduction and things. And he's sitting just outside of where he was outside, and he was doing a little puja ceremony, little fire thing himself, and doing some different things. And before I had any idea what happened, all of a sudden the clouds completely separated, like it happened in Dharamsala, completely separated, and the day was as clear as could be with no clouds in the sky inside there.
So all that, I've been lucky enough to see some of that a little bit myself too.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because coming from the Zen tradition, I know, well, at least my American Zen teacher who studied with Suzuki Roshi.
Yeah.
It was very, the metaphysical was kind of like, it's not that it wasn't there, but it wasn't, what she taught me is it wasn't really, you don't focus on it too much, you just, kind of do this sitting, eating, walking, all that, which is incredible practice.
Yeah.
Good foundational. But the Tibetan, at least my experience with our Lama here, is just another realm. Mm-hmm. And it has so much joy and spontaneity and sort of like...
Yeah, well, the kind of Sanskrit word siddhi, and who's a Mahasiddhi, which is like a great adept, we can't necessarily show, like, for example, Lama Zopa is the most perfect example of a monk, as pure as can be, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama is. But not all the Tibetan Lamas, give off that, including Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe would go off and learn how to drive and go to the beach, and he'd wear clothes. I mean, there were many different things, which reminded me. I don't know if you ever read those books by Carlos Castaneda. Okay, so I don't know if you remember them, but one of the great teachings in there toward the end, that Don Juan told Carlos Castaneda, in 5 years' time at this thing, I'm going to meet you exactly at this park bench in Mexico City. And Carlos Castaneda went to that park bench, and there was, there basically was Don Juan, the Indian Yaqui, who was a sorcerer and man of knowledge, and he was in clothes, a suit and tie. And he basically was teaching him that it doesn't matter, you can't grasp onto the outside thing. You have to let go, and you also need to adjust to whatever the situation was. So whatever it was, he was teaching them. So Lama Yeshe had the aspect of teaching, basically, with everything he does, basically could be anything, as far as taking place. And Lama Zopa, of course, always gave us the teachings of how you act as a pure monk. He was a perfect example. His mind was never separating from the teachings. Lama's always having to push him and kick him to eat when we'd be there for food, because he'd be sitting there offering it out to the entire universe of Buddhas and sentient beings that are starving and and so these were all incredible teachings and things along the way. So you don't know what powers somebody has or doesn't have. Yeah. So that was kind of what what a lot of those teachings and things would be. So because we're running out of time, I'm going to let you know one other thing, because now there becomes a new change in my life taking place. Okay. And so I find myself in doing some retreats, and in the retreat I'm having very clear picture of my mother being sick, having cancer, and this keeps coming up. So we don't usually talk during the retreat. So at the end of the retreat, I get on a phone and I call back, "Hi Mom, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good. What's going on?" Like you usually talk. I say, are you feeling okay? Is everything good?" "Yeah, I feel perfect. Everything's great." Okay. So I somewhat feel relieved and satisfied with that, and we talk a little bit more. I say goodbye, and and I'm calling from out in the country, not even in Melbourne, because I'm at one of the retreat centers outside, and so basically I go back, and somehow I'm feeling good about it, but then all of a sudden it starts coming clear to me again. Something is wrong. So I make the decision to go back home to visit with my mother, because I just felt something didn't feel right. So now I'd been in Chiang Rai-sik for 2.5 years or so, and in Melbourne for 2.5 years and things, and so we went. I went back basically, and that was because this, what I felt. So about a couple weeks after being back with her, she asked me to go with her over to the, the hospital over by UIC off of the Eisenhower over there. And I said, "Yeah, what for? What are we going over?" She says, "Well, I've got this back pain, and they're not sure, whether it's a gallbladder or, gallstones or kidney, they're not really 100% sure." So, so we take her there, and they set up, to go to, to remove those, basically. And the night before they went to remove, to go into the operation, with my mother sitting over here and the doctor's over here, the oncologist. And I said, "How do you know that that's not cancer?" He says, "Well, we don't know, but from all the signs." Now my mother's in good shape. She's 51 years old. Okay, and everything is pretty good. It says none of this points to this being anything other than that. I said, "But in reality, this is exploratory surgery, because I'm having this things come back." So anyway, she was in the surgery for hours more than she was supposed to be when they came out, and it turns out she did end up having cancer, and so the doctor says to me, "Well, we removed all of it, basically." And I said, "You removed all of it?" I said, "How do you know you removed all of it?" He said, "Well, we removed everything we could see in the surrounding area, which is what they did." I said, but you don't really know that you removed all of it or not." And he said, "No, now this is just between me and him." I said, "Okay, fine." So my mother comes out of that surgery. She takes on some radiation treatment, and so basically I had heard that the Dalai Lama's private doctor, who was also my doctor that I went to many times, Dr. Yoshi Donden, who was on 48 Hours here on TV and things because of doing work with women's breast cancers and different things. And in fact, they brought him out in the early 70s, and he brought other monks, and they took him in to see somebody. And when they took him in, they didn't let him see any of the charts with the person. So he goes in there, he does a pulse diagnosis, checks their urine, things, and just like he would do with me, he didn't ask me anything. He'd just tell me, "Oh, you're having this, this, and this," and give me medicine, and then I get better. So he was coming out, and he was filled up because of all these things he's doing. I let them know who I was, that I had a long relationship with them, and they allowed us to go out there, to drive out there. So we took my mother inside, and the Yeshidun checks her, takes the things. He says she's got 6 small tumors right now. They're in her lungs. But we can remove it. In fact, I can't remember clearly. It was the lungs or liver, but in any case, they have 6 small tumors. But not to worry. He's got medication that'll dissolve it and break it up, in that time period. And he had the medicine with him, and he gave it to us for 3 months. And then in 3 months, I was to send to Dharamsala, for another, 3 months supply, which would be, what was necessary in order to do this. So I go to get the medicine, what I need to send in, which is basically, written out in Tibetan, the whole prescription and things. And I look, and the medicine's all there. I said, Mom, you haven't been taking the medicine. She says, yeah, well, I'd taken the medicine, but I wasn't feeling very good, when I would take it. And my friend said, what are you taking? You don't even know what you're taking. I said, Mom, when you go to the doctors here and you go to the pharmacist, you don't know what you're taking. Even if you're taking what they're supposed to be giving you, you still don't know what it is. But you take it and things anyway. And I said, as far as feeling sick, this works that it goes inside of you and it breaks up the toxins. And so when it breaks up the toxins, a lot of times you're not going to feel really good, but that's eliminating them, from your system and things. So, it didn't matter at that point. A couple weeks later, she suffered a stroke. And, at that point, I went back to the doctor after we came back. When we went for the visit to the oncologist, I said, I took her to see a doctor that I used, a Tibetan doctor, and he says she's got 6 small tumors. No, she doesn't, he said. So then this thing happened with the stroke, and by that time they found there were these tumors that were there, and they were thinking they'd be able to implant something and just send the chemo, because she hadn't really done chemo at that time. She did radiation before, send it right to it, but the stroke had created some other issues, and so unfortunately she only lived for some more months, basically. But I came back, and my sisters, I have 3 sisters, were all married, and their husbands all worked down at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And so while I was taking care of my mother, I would go with them because it was a very short day. Basically, they basically would finish up. I think later it would end at 2:00. It was either in the earlier days it was 1:20. So you'd start early in the morning and get back, so I could get back and things and have full day and things like that. But so I was there doing that, and then coming home to more or less be with her and have her take care of her. And so throughout that, I was the only one living there with her. So I became the executor to the estate. So when she passed away, I had to take care of all of that and sell the house and the car and all the things and distribute. So that. By that point, it started off a different phase of my life as far as being into the, Western world and things. So I'm only going to say one other thing because I've only got a minute before we have to do something about my car. But the interesting thing is that somebody from my brother-in-laws, they told him about my background, and he was asking me about things. Well, how is it being down here? I said, well, here's the difference. Everybody down here is looking up at the board up there, and if they bought something at 4, they're praying to go to 5. If they sold it at 5, they're praying to go to 4, because that's where they make money, basically. I just came from where they're sitting with thousands of monks and high beings that are sitting there praying to bring peace and happiness to the world. So it's it's a little different thing, and now I've been away for many years, living outside the U.S. and things, and so try to incorporate things back into there is what I'm doing now. So maybe we, stop this right now, and I can either try to see if we can move my car someplace else and do it, or do it another time. It's up to you.